I mean, I'm kind of impressed that we only left it a month. I'm sure now, I am currently recording from the control room of the theatre.
Oh, God.
Where I've been doing, like, proper audio things occasionally. Like, a couple of nights ago, we did a karaoke with the kids. Mm-hmm. And I was, like, up here having to balance the levels of things, and I was just sweating bullets the whole time. It was so incredibly stressful. Although my favourite part of that was when a kid, like an 8-year-old kid, came up and sang a song by the band that the female celebrity from the weird second series of King of Bots is from. I'm not sure that was a full sentence. But she sang a song by the band that the female celebrity in the second series of King of Bots is from.
Okay.
It was the most horrendous song I have ever heard. It's called Yes or Yes. And on screen, she was singing it in Chinese. And on screen was the English translation.
Okay.
And there was one verse that went something like this. It was, I reject your rejection. There are only 2 options, yes or yes.
Wow.
And this is like an 8-year-old just sat there happily singing this.
Well.
Although it wasn't as good as the kid that came up, another tiny 8-year-old child who came up and sang a Limp Bizkit song. Probably my favourite thing that's happened this summer. In fact, by quite some way, my favourite thing that's happened this summer.
Dear. Such madness.
I've been, well, obviously in my position at an academic summer school, I've taken the opportunity to teach some kids a few things about robot combat. Because I've got a sort of half-built ant weight with me, I've been taking that into some lessons.
Yeah.
So, for example, we have a couple of coding programs, and one of the things they do as part of their sort of final day on the course is they use some things called spheros, if you've heard of them.
I have, yeah, little spherical robot things.
Yeah, and they're fun because you can program them or sort of directly control them from an iPad. So I've been using that as an opportunity to come in and go, hey, if you liked doing that and you think you could learn a few things about electronics, here's the kind of thing you can make. And they've usually been completely underwhelmed because the Sphero they've been playing with for half an hour is faster and has flashy lights. But they're polite and I let them drive it and they pretend to have a nice time and we're all good.
Nice.
There's another group as well that have been doing some work with motors. Mm-hmm. So I kind of go in and go, hey guys, if you learn a little bit about motors, here's the kind of thing you could make. And that's been fine. They've had a little drive around. They've had a slightly nicer time because their expectations were lower. And that's been really good. And then the third thing I've been doing, which is very slightly naughty of me,
Oh, no.
is I've been running like random sessions. Like last night, I was running a public speaking session, trying to get some kids to do a speech at their graduation ceremony. And we had 5 minutes at the end. So I like just quickly threw up one of our behind the scenes fights from Bogglepots.
Spoiler alert, Ride. Spoiler alert.
I probably shouldn't do that, but they can't even access YouTube while they're here. So there's no danger, right?
I'm sort of amazed. I'm trying to think, like, if I were teaching, I don't think I'd ever let on that I have an online presence as well. I wouldn't. But then I guess maybe kids just don't care that much. I don't know. I'm sort of surprised that you're letting them in, you know?
Well, bear in mind that I've already got the Spinnerproof website blocked. Because when I was helping kids log into the Wi-Fi, muscle memory made me go to spinnerproof.com in order for it to redirect to the login page. And the IT department noticed this weird spike in traffic to this website they've never heard of, scrolled down, saw the word dildo and immediately blocked it. And also earlier, because tonight I'm doing what we call staff enrichment.
Okay.
So basically, part of our timetable is enrichment sessions where we teach kids about a thing that's not on their curriculum.
Yeah.
And we're kind of doing that for staff as well, just for a bit of fun. So tonight, I'm doing an intro to robot combat. And I was trying to get some pictures of certain robots. Last Rites was one of them. And hardcore robotics is blocked because it's got the word hardcore in it.
Oh, dear. I don't miss having internet filters. That's a nice thing to not have anymore.
It's horrible having to live here with that.
I bet.
Especially considering my room is like the one room where the Wi-Fi doesn't really work.
It doesn't matter anywhere then, does it?
I've had to physically move the bed in order to get Wi-Fi on my bed. Because I don't have a desk. My desk has been replaced with loads of laptop charging cabinets.
Of course it has.
It's like, it's a room they can't put kids in, so they just shove me in there instead.
Lucky you.
I very much get the raw end of this deal. But yeah, I've been evangelising about robot combat, and that feels good.
Nice.
Although I've done zero work on the ant weight.
Well, I'm sure I can forgive you.
Who knows? Maybe my final week I'll get some spare time.
Is spare time a thing that you can ever have again? Is that a thing while you're working there?
It doesn't appear to be.
Dear, I guess we should explain where the hell Spinnerproof went for a few weeks there. Well, it's not a complicated story at all. We're both very busy and we couldn't record. We tried to find a day where we could record and quickly edit and get it up before I went away. But yeah, we couldn't find a chance, and it's taken us a little while afterwards to find time to record again as well. So sorry.
It isn't just finding time to record, it's finding time to plan and edit. And our solution this time was just not to plan.
Yeah. Spinnerproof takes a long time to make for both of us. It's more than just the 2 or 3 hours of recording. There's a lot more that goes into it. But so yeah, sort of like it's not. We need to find one evening. It's like we need to find one evening followed by at least 2 evenings where one of us is free to edit, and then we also need some time before that to plan it. And it's just a bit of a process. But yeah, we've done a lot less planning this time to try and catch up a little bit with BattleBots. So we're going to talk about 3 episodes of BattleBots, which I think are the ones at the time we're recording. They're the ones that we've missed. I think by the time this releases, there'll be another one. Is there one this Friday?
There is one this Friday, yes.
Yeah. So we're recording on Thursday. What's the date today? The 8th. By the time anyone hears this, there will be episode 9 of BattleBots. We're obviously not talking about that. We'll do that with episode 10 in a few weeks.
This kind of sounds like the start of a police interview. For the benefit of the tape, the date is the 8th of August, 2019. It's 2:30 in the afternoon.
Well, I don't know. Some people might care.
I want someone to try and reverse engineer our entire schedule.
Well, I think
it's going to weird people out that we're recording on like the afternoon of a weekday.
Oh, yeah. What's the time? Yeah, 2:30 on the 8th. There you go.
Although I'm in a completely almost blacked out room because I'm in the middle of a theatre, so it could be any time of day for me. I'm looking out over a theatre where I haven't turned on the lights. So it's just like 4 fire exit signs. It's quite creepy.
You a vampire?
Yes. I literally had a child who was scared of me for like 2 months at one of my old schools because he decided I was a vampire. True story, boring story. Let's talk about robots.
Yeah. Okay then. First up, we have Gruff versus Copperhead, which I thought was an interesting fight. And there's been I want to talk about the commentary for it more than the fight itself. I don't know if you have any sort of overall thoughts on the fight.
I think I know what you're referring to, but I want you to go for it.
Okay, so we know after the fact that Copperhead had drive issues in this fight. They kept I think it was like an overheating issue or something. In fact, I'm not even gonna commit to that because I can't remember. It's been a long time since I saw that video. But Robert did do a video explaining what went on in that fight, and he had very little control over how the robot drove, which is why it drives the way it does. But a lot of the way this was framed and presented gave the appearance that he was an inexperienced driver that then did a bad job in this fight, and that bothers me a little bit. Well, yeah, it bothers me. I think that's unfair, and I think probably the clearest example of how television can twist things. I'm sure that this happens with every team on BattleBots. I'm sure it's always presented in a certain way that's not quite true, but this is just the first time I think I've really sort of seen it and gone, yeah, that doesn't seem right to me. I think it's unfair on Robert to have the commentary, especially like panning him for being a bad driver, because I don't think he is.
This is kind of back to the dark side of TV, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where they have a narrative that they want to push and they have the power to push it. I think the first time that I really noticed this was with Nelly, where they described Sarah as having no robot combat experience, which is just the most ridiculous sentence possible. So, competed on Robot Wars, has built multiple robots in lighter weight classes, including a scaled-down version of the one she's driving now, runs a bloody competition. What more experience do you really want? And now we have the clearly incompetent Robert Cowan, who I don't even know why he's on that team. You know, what's he done before?
Yeah, he knows nothing about building or driving robots.
It was pure charity that they let him have a drive.
The thing is, they had a lot of material for sort of doing a weird narrative here as well, because it is like the other, I forget what the other guy's name is now, I'm sorry, but like there is like the team captain who normally drives it. Yeah, Zach. Who drives it, and I think it's like his idea and his robot and stuff. I think it's like a follow-up to Poison Arrow, isn't it?
It's kind of a weird follow-up to it, yeah.
Yeah, it's a weird, but like Robert's there helping build it and sort of just be like a team member and stuff. So they've got that, and it's sort of like they can sort of, because it's someone else driving it, they can sort of do that narrative of like we're gonna let someone else on the team drive it for this fight, and then they've got that interview with Zach, which I expect has been taken somewhat out of context, but there's still words that came out of his mouth where he's describing fighting Gruff as like an easy fight and that they expect to win. So it's a good time to give it to someone else, which I don't think is quite right either. Again, I'm sure that's been taken out of context somewhat, but like there's all that sort of narrative that builds up in this particular fight.
To be fair, those interview situations, it's really easy to say something just very slightly wrong. And it's then so easy for that to get twisted in that way.
Yeah.
And it's just a shame that this series in particular, it seems like that's something that people should be worried about. You know, people are having to, or certainly going into another series, I think people are going to see a lot of this and really be thinking about how they manage how they come across again. Which last season, it kind of felt like they didn't need to do. But maybe that's just because the people this was happening to were people without a platform to set the record straight.
Yeah, I don't know. It's sort of really hard to... It's hard to tell when this has happened and when it's not. My sort of assumption is that every interview is in some way manipulated to tell a certain story. And most of the time it's fairly innocuous and fine, but sometimes it comes across as a bit sort of funny. And yeah, I mean, this is something that I was really nervous about when we went on... Can I say this? When we went on Bogglebots, I was really nervous about this beforehand, so...
Oh, yeah, same. And I can think of at least 2 stupid things that I said in interviews.
Yeah.
that I could potentially get flack for when it comes out.
We'll see. We'll see what happens.
Actually, I can reveal one of them, and this is the biggest crime of all. I referred to this as the Spinnerproof podcast, which, as we all know, is not what it's called. And I don't think you realised when I did it.
I don't think we've ever sort of like done this on air. I've complained about this to you several times behind the scenes, and I feel bad doing it now. But like, Spinnerproof is called Spinnerproof. That's the name of the show. That's
why we changed the logo now after nearly 2 years.
Yeah. It was our fault, but it's called Spinnerproof. There is no word podcast in the name of this show. But that is not important.
It's like calling you Sam Human.
You could do that.
Are you actually human?
Just about, yeah.
Controversy of interviews aside, the judge's decision is another one that I think it's fair and I get it. But I still think it was another one that, if I remember rightly, got people kind of going, I don't know.
Yeah, this is definitely a fight where Gruff is kind of like the people's winner, you know. They're the spiritual winner of this fight. And I think that Copperhead won by virtue of just having a more damaging weapon. And that was sort of it. Like we were sort of saying, they didn't have a lot of control over where it was going. And in the examples that Robert showed on his YouTube channel, there's times when he's sort of like either not putting any input in or just driving straight forwards and the thing's going all over the place. And so... because they've got that big spinning weapon, they're going to do more damage. They don't need a lot of control to do the damage. And yeah, just the way the judging works means they got all the points. But yeah, I think Gruff did really well, I think. And I think it's fair to say they're the people's winner.
I'm just a massive fan of Gruff in general. I have been since I first saw them in Robo Games, just as a fast, aggressive lifter. This kind of fight is where they can shine. And they do have an inherent, I don't know if you'd call it an inherent disadvantage, but... when you design a robot like that, you know that you are putting yourself in a difficult spot competitively, where you're basically relying on getting a knockout without actually having that much knockout potential, and then knowing that if it goes to the judges, the rules are kind of weighted against you. But that just makes me love the fact that it's here more and the fact that it's putting on good fights more. Yeah,
it's good because it's like it's a very robust robot that's got more to it than something like Duck, which I quite like.
Ooh,
like it's probably not quite as tanky as Duck, just by virtue of the fact that it is more complicated and stuff, but like it is... It took a lot of...
Whoa, that might be a bit of a stretch. Or that might need clarifying. I would not call Duck a simple machine. That's like 5 isolated redundant systems in a completely milled aluminium unibody. I'm
not saying that Duck is simple to design or make, but it's like a simple idea in that it is, we're going to build a very robust box with I mean, I guess this version of Duck has got slightly more of an actual weapon, but like certainly the last one felt like a very token weapon. Maybe this is really unfair and I'm being silly, but like Gruff feels like it's got a bit more to it in terms of like the audience-facing complexity, let's say, where I think the weapon mechanism appears a bit more complicated and a bit more flimsy, and it's got the flamethrower as well, which is going to take up space inside and stuff. So they've got maybe complexity is not quite the right word, but they've got less like weight left over for putting into the armor and stuff. But it's still, you know, it's a very... In any case, Gruff is a very robust robot, but Copperhead gave it big hits and Gruff kept going. And so I think that's quite cool to have a different a different approach to the same idea of let's build a really robust robot and still have something interesting going on there.
You've touched on something I really want to talk about there, but I'm going to loop back around first and say I think that Gruff and Duck kind of represent two different approaches to building something extremely durable. In Duck, you've got the very compact approach, where you make it as small as possible and then armour up heavily around that. Whereas Gruff is a bit larger, a bit more spacious. I think it's maybe using the sort of air gap as armour a bit more than Duck is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's then remaining sort of reliable by presumably being very well mounted internally and very sensibly designed internally to take the hits that do make it through. Whereas Duck is reliable and durable, partly through the pure build method and partly through the insane amount of redundancy. But they're both achieving the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
The thing I really want to go about, though, or the thing I really want to talk about, is that weapon mechanism, which is quite possibly my favourite thing in this whole series.
Explain the mechanism, then.
I've heard conflicting reports, but they're basically using a mechanism similar to what we used for our hammer, where they've got a motor which is winding a belt on, or appears to be winding a belt onto a spool that then pulls a sort of cylindrical pulley thing that is at the base of the lifter to actually lift it. And they seem to have the same in the other direction as well.
Okay.
And it is just beautiful. And I've explained it terribly, and everyone can just look at it and go, hey, that looks like a seatbelt, and then probably realise what I mean.
So why do you like it? Do you like it because it's very similar to what we've done, or because of some other inherent property of this design?
I feel vindicated by it. It's like, hey, this isn't a stupid idea that we came up with. This is something that people who know what they're doing might do.
Yeah, considerably better than how we did it, I suspect.
Oh, yeah, but I'm completely validated by it, and that feels nice.
Okay.
With hindsight, it's interesting only to me, but here we are. Gruff team, you made a beautiful weapon mechanism, and I appreciate you. And if you happen to do some kind of Facebook or Reddit post that explained it fully, that would really help me out in the show notes. What do you make of the flamethrower?
I really like that flamethrower. I think it's a very... I have no idea how effective it is and how hot it is as compared to other flamethrowers. I have to imagine it's hotter than most other flamethrowers, but I think it reminds me a bit of, what is it, Complete Control's flamethrower? And I just think it's cool. I think it's a very cool looking flamethrower. And I loved Robert's reaction to it when he got hit by it.
Oh, is that the moment that he did and swear?
He did do and swear, and it got beeped.
What a naughty man.
Yeah, shocking.
Question I want to ask about the flamethrower. Is it really a flamethrower? Or is it a torch?
You and your definitions of things. Yes, it's a flamethrower. It's throwing flames. What more could you want?
I feel like it's a very long flame blowtorch.
I feel like we've had exactly this discussion about the flamethrowers that Elon Musk was selling.
I mean, compared to this, they were flamethrowers. If being a flamethrower is a spectrum, seeing this has shifted Elon Musk's flamethrower more towards the centre. It was a flamethrower, just not a very good one. You know what really annoys me with it, though? The fact it's off-centre and there's nothing to make it symmetrical.
Oh, that's fine. I actually don't mind that. I think that's fine. You don't always have to build a symmetrical robot.
You know what? I think I'd be more okay with it if it was on the right and not the left.
Why?
Because then it would feel like someone like holding an RPG or something, which most people would do on their right shoulder.
Could be a left-handed person holding it.
No, that's not allowed. That doesn't fit with my view of the world.
Yeah, that's actually not... So I shoot left-handed, but I actually have to shoot rifles right-handed because you can't... Because of the way the casing that gets ejected from the rifle, that gets ejected from the right of the rifle. And so if you're holding it left-handed in your left hand and pulling the trigger that way, you end up with ejecting those casings into your face, which is not good. So you have to shoot them right-handed, even if you would prefer to do it lefty.
And you're not left-handed, are you?
I'm not left-handed. I'm left-eyed, which means I want to shoot most things lefty. So I shoot, like, I do archery left-handed.
My handedness has always overcome my eyedness.
No, I really struggle to shoot right-handed. Like, if I'm playing, like, paintball or using, like, BB guns and stuff, I'd always do those lefty because it's just so much more logical to me. But yeah, when I was shooting actual rifles, it's like, well, I've got to do this with my right hand. It got to the point where I ended up having, because I really struggled to close my left eye and keep my right eye open, so I had to end up having like an eye patch over my left eye so that I could aim accurately and stuff. It was ridiculous.
Pirates with rifles. Lovely.
Arr, matey.
No, I've always been left-eyed right-handed, and I've always shot right-handed, and I can shoot pretty well. Imagine how good I'd be left-handed.
I can shoot fairly well, but yeah, it's a lot of effort.
How did we get onto this again?
I'm on the Wikipedia page for flamethrowers to try and sort of get a better understanding of what they are. It does say that some of them do use gas.
Well, in BattleBots, I believe you have to use gas anyway.
Yeah.
I think it's only butane and propane that are allowed. It might even only be butane. To me, a flamethrower is generally a liquid fuel. That's my sort of vision of a flamethrower, in that you can use a flamethrower to set something on fire by throwing flaming fuel at it that then stays on it. That's my, like, old school view of a flamethrower, like Vietnam-style flamethrower.
Yeah, all the military ones are some kind of horrible gel stuff that's designed to stick to the target and keep burning. And then a lot of other sort of like flamethrowers you may have seen, like on YouTube, people making and using on like slow-mo guys or something. I think they're doing some kind of gasoline or something to do it. So most of them are liquid. A propane operated flamethrower is a relatively straightforward device. So there you go. Propane operated flamethrower. You can have gas flamethrowers. It's fine. What Gruff have is a flamethrower.
Is a Bunsen burner a flamethrower?
God.
Because that's basically what this is, but bigger.
Sure, let's call the Bunsen burner a flamethrower.
Wow, school just got a lot more fun.
Oh, yes.
So I'm just going back to another clip where they're using it. It's a lot. You know what? It's a longer flame than I remembered. I'll allow it. I thought it was like a flame that never turned yellow. I thought it was like pure red/blue flame. In which case, to me, that's blowtorch territory. But they get some distance. They get some yellow. I'm going to allow it.
This is probably the closest thing. Well, not the closest thing, but this is another one that's very close to that. What was it, like the plasma cutter or something in the Robot Wars game? Arenas of Destruction.
Yes. That terrible, terrible thing.
That unreasonably powerful weapon.
This flamethrower hasn't made any panels just randomly fly off, though.
No. They need to work on that.
They just don't know what they're doing. They're incompetent.
They need to patch the physics in the battle box, I think. Maybe for season 5.0 they'll do that.
No, they have a choice. Either fix the floor or patch the physics. They can't afford both.
Oh dear. Right then, we should move on.
I don't understand why you're so keen to talk about this fight.
Well, upon rewatching it earlier today, it's sort of maybe not as relevant, but like I just put it there. I went through the list of fights and went through the ones that I remembered, and this is one of them, so I figured it must be good to talk about.
This falls for me into the spectacular and memorable, but not easy to talk about bracket of fights. And I'm saying this, by the way, with the intention of you keeping it in, because I think this is an interesting point about how we're doing things at the moment.
Yeah, so we're talking about Hypershock versus Monsoon, which is a very short fight in which Monsoon gets beheaded, and that's kind of it.
And a very upsetting fight for me personally.
Why?
Because I wanted them both to win.
You want them both win. You're watching the wrong program if you want two robots to win.
Why can't they just shake hands and call it a draw at the start?
If they did that, can you imagine how upset you'd be at being deprived of a fight?
Look, we've all worked out by now that there is no pleasing me. So let's just stop trying.
You seem to get pretty fed up if there's lots of fights that are this short in an episode. Can you imagine if there were any where it was like, we're done? Or when like teams have backed out of fights and you go and call them cowards.
Look, that happened once. And I stand by it. To be fair, they didn't back out of a fight. They backed out of restarting a fight. And that, I think, is way worse. Because you've seen how good the fight is. It was really exciting. A thing happened that meant it had to be paused. And you're excited for the rest of it. You're like, hey, this is going in a really good direction. And then suddenly, nothing.
Poor Ryan.
But yeah, this is a short fight. So tell me why you like it.
It's not a failure mode I sort of predicted for Monsoon, and it was cool to see Hypershock working again properly, which I think we probably have seen before, actually, now that I think about it. But like, I don't know, it was just a particularly memorable fight because it was so fast and such an sort of efficient beheading of Monsoon, and in a way that I just didn't think. I just think it's a very impressive way to have won that fight, really.
I think it's a visually spectacular way to win it. But I'm not sure it's impressive insofar as I'm not sure that Hypershock really did anything to make it happen. Because they haven't gone and hit that part specifically. It just seems like a failure that had built up over time.
I mean, Hypershock definitely hit the back of Monsoon around. Like, they definitely got around the back, and yeah, they definitely got around.
Maybe I should have rewatched this fight.
I think you should. They definitely got round. They definitely hit the back of the robot a few times, and I'm pretty sure that in one of the interview things afterwards, Tom was saying, "Yeah, we lost it because Hypershock hit this thing over here, which caused this to fail, and then the thing came off."
Oh, yeah, I could actually see. Yeah, they get quite a few hits around the back. Maybe they did actively do something. Maybe I'm an idiot.
Just maybe.
I'm also a big fan of Tom's reaction when it happens, which is kind of 50%, oh no, we just lost this fight, and 50%, man, that was cool.
Yeah, he always has a very good attitude, I think.
Also interesting that, thinking in bingo terms in particular, in a sense, they've almost tapped out at that point because they're still fully mobile and they've just chosen to stop rather than carry on. Which is a sensible choice because there's no point carrying on. And even against Hypershock, there's no point just waiting for them to break down, considering the damage you're going to take doing so.
Yeah, maybe one to discuss with the rest of the guys, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure that is. I mean, were they definitely fully mobile? That's the other question. Is like, I mean, I'd have to imagine they would be.
Well, they did have a little spin around at the end, and I think as part of one of the interviews, or possibly something afterwards, Tom did say, we were still going, but no. Also, when you said rest of the guys, I wasn't sure what... I didn't realise that you were talking about bingo. I thought you were just like, yeah, just talk about this with the lads.
Yeah, the lads that we know.
All them lads.
No, the rest of the bingo guys, but...
I'm not suggesting that this counts as trying to tap out. I'm just saying it's a similar idea.
This is my point, though, because they didn't try to tap out.
Yeah. Basically, we had the incident where the Gigabyte team tried to tap out and kept driving around. And this is the exact opposite of that. They tried to do something they can't do and then continue to do something stupid. Whereas in this case, Tom has just done the sensible thing in the first place and not made a fool of himself. Yeah,
I feel like when that Gigabyte thing happened, we said exactly this, which was like, if you want to tap out, just stop driving. Like, they can't make you drive.
I would love to see the referee just take the controller off you and check if you can still move that way.
Yeah, give me that.
Especially that particular referee, because he's still terrifying. I'm sure he's a lovely man, but he is terrifying.
I don't understand why I still haven't even noticed him. So look now.
I mean, this is you we're talking about. You're observant, but only in very particular ways.
Oh, no, that's a replay. Damn it, this fight is so short.
You don't say.
I don't even think he's that terrifying. I don't know what you're on about.
It just seems like he'd mess you up if he wanted to.
Well, you've got to build a robot to defend you.
A quick word for Hypershock while we're here. Working and winning fights.
Yeah, working, doing well. I still like that robot. I'm excited to see more of it, as always.
What's their record at this point?
You are asking the wrong member of Spinnerproof.
Look, it's been a long 4 weeks. I've kind of lost touch. I'm talking only for this season, if that helps. Not like generally.
I think they've sort of in general done fairly well this season, actually, haven't they? I think they had 2 fights, and I think they may have won.
I'm trying to remember if they've had a third or if this is their second.
I think this is their second, and I think they might have actually won both of them.
I know they're unbeaten. It's just a question of how many fights they've had.
I'm pretty sure it's 2.
If my laptop will allow me to scroll down on this page.
Scrolling? What is this thing you call scrolling? I've never heard of it.
Yeah, so they're 2-0 at the moment. I think if there's any vertical spinner I would actively root for in the top 16, it would be Hypershock. Well, and Monsoon, to be fair, if they got there. And Cobalt, actually.
But not Cobalt.
If there's any non-British vertical that I would root for... Actually, if there's any American vertical I would root for if it got to the final 16, it is Hypershock.
So there are definitely other non-British ones.
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
You know, Death Roll completely deserve it. Cobalt completely deserve it. Monsoon would completely deserve it.
Endgame, definitely.
I'm inconsistent.
That's not like you at all.
And that brings us on to another vertical spinner that will almost certainly be in the top 16.
Yes. But we can't, I don't think they'll do very well, though.
I can't tell if you're serious or not.
So up next, we have Bronco versus Bite Force.
Now, I can't remember how strongly I went in with this opinion at the start of the season. So I'm just going to do it now. I think this is the year Bronco's going to get found out. And obviously, saying that on the back of a fight against Bite Force sounds a bit stupid. Because of course they were going to lose that. They never do particularly well against verticals, and it's Bite Force. But the fact that we've seen them consistently now being outclassed by what is basically the most common and dominant design just makes me feel like the time has come to not see them hit the top 16. And you know what? I won't be sad.
But they're the best flipper in BattleBots. Of course, you've got to have them in the top 16.
They have been the best flipper in BattleBots. But that's because BattleBots doesn't like selecting particularly good flippers. I still believe that probably half of the general batch of wedge flippers would come into BattleBots and do probably as well as Bite Force.
Bite Force?
Sorry, as Bronco. They both begin with B. That makes them the same robot to me.
Bite Force is an ambitious target, I think.
Yeah, if you brought in, say, the current version of Vulcan from King of Bots, I would expect that to do really well. If Michael Oates were to bring something over, I would expect that to do really well. Because flippers are still something that people aren't necessarily all that prepared for. But the style of flipper that Bronco is, while very good at throwing things very high, just has so many disadvantages. And you'll notice I'm being very careful not to say flaws or design flaws, because I hate it when people do that. But it is a very compromised style of robot. And we've now got Hydra that's come in with a flipper that seems to be achieving similar, if not quite equal results, but without a lot of those disadvantages. You know, they have a body style that is lower all around and a bit more defended. They have a flipper system that throws things high without throwing itself around. And they have a flipper that apparently does damage as well, because why not?
Who doesn't love a flipper that can tear a robot in half?
I think you'll find
Bronco ever done something like that? Sorry, thirds. Has Bronco ever done anything like that?
No, they've done the fairly typical break things by making them hit the ground a lot. And they've done very well at getting robots out of the arena in an arena with very little out. And I think one thing, if you're going to make a direct Hydra Bronco comparison, I do think that Bronco is a better controlled machine, if only by virtue of the fact they've had so many fights with it.
I think one of the advantages that Bronco has, I think, over Hydra is that Bronco can fire the weapon more often. I think Hydra has quite a long time between flips.
More often in terms of in faster succession, yes. More often in general, no.
Sorry. Yeah, Hydra can keep going for longer, but yeah, I mean, yeah, the pace, I guess, of Bronco, the interval between flips is shorter.
And we also don't necessarily have that much of a gauge of how reliable Hydra's system is going to be.
Yeah.
It feels like, you know, there are a lot of things in that to go wrong. I think mechanically, the pneumatics are probably a bit simpler, but that could just be based on a grossly incomplete understanding of pneumatics.
Let's not go there.
I'm just basically going, fewer moving parts.
What I think I do understand about Bronco's weapon is that it needs the front of it to work at all, and they lost it so fast in this fight. Like, within the first 15 seconds, they had lost the front of their weapon.
Which is a shame, because I liked the adaptation they'd come into with the front.
Yeah, they had like the more wedgy, forky things on the front, didn't they?
Yeah, just nice sort of low profile isn't quite what I mean, but quite thin, so it was going to be difficult for Bite Force to get in and bend one of them with a good hit.
Yeah.
But again, the shape and style of Bronco means that pretty much anything that's half well driven is just going to be getting to them from the side anyway. So the makeup of their front end almost doesn't matter.
Poor Bronco. They've not had a good showing this season so far, I don't think.
Well, this is their only fight.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, for some reason they always start late.
I think I'm confused because they were obviously highlighted quite a lot when Hydra was first introduced. So yeah.
We also had them at the live event, which I think can confuse your memory a bit. Actually, did we have them at the live event?
Yeah.
Yeah, because they had free shipping, didn't they?
Can't remember at this point. Yeah, maybe. I'm not gonna commit to anything anymore. I've lost all confidence in my memory.
How do you think I feel not having my, 8 pages of notes?
I don't know how you're coping at all. It's amazing.
That's my secret. I'm not coping. Inside, I'm screaming.
I think that this fight is maybe a good excuse to talk about the sound design this season. I don't think we've talked about that yet.
We've spoken about it, but not for a while. I've complained about it.
Okay, yeah, you've complained about it, and then this is the fight where I was like, where it was really distracting to me, the sounds that they're using, because there was just this very repetitive, big sort of clanging sound, very sort of like bassy clanging sound anytime that Bite Force even touched Bronco, and it was like nothing happened, like a spark flew and that was it, but there's this big sort of like clong whenever it happens, and it's really quite distracting.
And it's annoying to me because I think there were a couple of episodes where the sound seemed to be better. It seemed to have gone back to a more natural style, presumably using a bit more of the live audio. And now suddenly we're back to a toddler hitting saucepans in the kitchen again.
I would imagine that the sound is not all done by one person.
But even then, you'd think there'd be some kind of consistent style, or at least they'd be aiming for a consistent style.
Yeah, who knows?
Evidently not the people producing the show.
They know nothing of what they're doing. I don't know. I just think it's a shame to sort of take it. I mean, I'm not expecting it to be the box audio because when they've done the box audio on YouTube, that's not brilliant. I suspect that what they're doing on YouTube is not at all processed. I suspect that they could take that and make it sound better than it does.
But why bother?
This is going way too far where there's a bunch of stuff that's been added and it's like, yeah, it's quite distracting. It's especially distracting when it's where because in this fight the sound doesn't match the hit. And it also feels like it's the same sound. It feels like the same sound clip being used over and over again in the same fight. And it's like really stands out because you do that. It's like if you had a Wilhelm scream every 5 seconds or something. It's like that's going to be really obvious real fast.
I love how much that got to you in the intro to Robot Wars.
Wilhelm screams are everywhere. As soon as you know what it sounds like, they're just everywhere and it's maddening.
Do you think we're still complaining about this series more than the one before? Or have things kind of leveled out now?
I think things have probably leveled out. I think the things that we're complaining about are just repetitions of things we've complained about in the past.
I still feel like I've not massively enjoyed this season in the way I did the one before it.
I preferred the other one. The run time on this is the thing that I'm going to keep coming back to because it is really irritating how long it is. It is just too long, and it's not as bad as I thought it would be. I was expecting it to be much more of a drag for me, and I am enjoying most of the stuff that's in between all the fights. It's just an hour and a half is a long time, or 2 hours if you're watching it as it's broadcast. That's a long time, and it's a lot to commit to. I think once a week.
I think it's bothered me now that I'm busy, especially since I'm tending to work on Saturdays, so I can't really stay up for it. So I'm kind of waking up and quickly just bashing through all the fights in about 25 minutes and then coming back and watching the whole thing later. And that's a really bad way to enjoy it. I think I enjoy it more when I just watch all of it through because everything that's in there is good. And if it's a bit too long, I think you can always sit down and kind of watch it in 2 sittings and just stop part way. There even tends to be quite an obvious midpoint that you can stop at if you want to. Whereas I think because it's a sport, I feel the need to have watched the matches as soon as possible and everything else I can kind of go back to later. Because you can't spoil a pit segment, but you can spoil the result of a fight.
Yeah, I think because I don't go on the Reddit as much as you, that I don't feel the sort of spoiler thing as much for you. But like I do when we're running on when we're running on schedule, I sort of do feel there's a pressure to sort of have it watched within a certain amount of time so that we can talk about it. And it's hard to find either an hour and a half in one go or even 2 evenings where I'm not either doing something else or trying to spend that time with Hannah. You know, it's sort of it can be challenging to sort of find 45 minutes on 2 evenings to sort of sit through it. And it's got to be 45 minutes on 2 evenings or 90 minutes in one evening between airing and the Tuesday that we record, which is easy for the first episode but harder for the second one in the pairs that we do. So it's a challenge. It's too long.
I wonder if they'll stick with this. I wonder what the feedback they're getting is, because what I see is mostly people who like the longer runtime.
I don't know. I suspect it's probably... I have to keep reminding myself that it's 2 hours, because it's a 2 hour slot, isn't it? It's not an hour.
Oh yeah, and with adverts, it is a drag.
Yeah.
But that's coming from someone who never watches live TV and therefore isn't used to them. If you're used to them, it's probably fine.
Yeah, this is going to be... I can't judge what I think most people will be reacting... about how most people will be reacting, because I am not even slightly sort of engrossed, I guess, in that particular way of watching television. I don't watch it properly. So I don't know. I would imagine that the feedback they get is probably about half. There'll be a lot of like public, this is amazing, we want it to be long, and I suspect there'll be quite a lot of private kind of emails that have been like, this is too long, make it shorter.
Do you reckon people actually email the people that make TV shows to complain about them? Is that a thing you really think happens?
Yes. Yeah, people do it. Whether or not people our age do it is another matter, but I think people do it.
Which begs the question, do you do it?
I have never once emailed a television show.
I'd like to say I haven't, but we both know I have.
Yes.
But until then, I hadn't. Which is a really roundabout way of saying I've only done it once.
You weren't emailing to complain or anything, though, were you? You were emailing for more information.
I was emailing for preferential treatment.
And yeah, unless you snuck some complaints in there too, I don't know.
I was like, oh, by the way, sort that sound out.
Yeah.
Because you
Stop
totally have
faking the
control
sound.
over that.
Stop faking the sound and make it shorter.
Did I email a TV programme?
Do you like email or write into like Blue Peter or something?
No, I'm saying, when I emailed BattleBots, did I email a TV show? Because I don't think I did. I think I emailed a live event.
You didn't email the production crew, did you?
No, I emailed a live event that is then filmed and edited for television, and that editing process, at least, seems to be out of their control.
Right, to the people who are making Bugglebots, please try and find a way to get it aired on television, because then Bugglebots will become a TV show, and Ryan has definitely emailed you. And then Ryan will have emailed a TV show, and that will be glorious.
I mean, you watch it on your TV. Does that make it a TV show?
No, I think it has to be... Oh, I'm going to define a TV show now, are we? I think it
Yes,
probably has to be
we are.
aired like on television. The thing that's difficult is whether or not Netflix counts.
I was going to say, if someone has a YouTube Red subscription, for example, and watches Bugglebots with that, does that then bring it like closer to being TV because they've subscribed to that with money?
No, they're not. Because you're not paying for Bugglebots, are you? You're paying to remove ads everywhere on the site.
Which also sends some income to the things you watch.
Well, yeah, to replace the ads that you're not seeing. If you were watching a Red exclusive, or what is it? It's called YouTube Premium now, isn't it, or something stupid? Anyway, if you were watching,
I don't know.
Google can't help but rebrand everything they do constantly. But if you were watching a show, I guess that's on YouTube Red /Premium and only available there, then that's closer to a TV show, I guess.
So what about watching a YouTube original that's open to everyone, like the terrible Slow Mo Guys series we just had?
It wasn't terrible.
It was pretty bad.
It wasn't as good as their first one, but it wasn't terrible.
Yeah, and their first one wasn't good.
I quite enjoyed that one.
It was acceptable.
It is amazing how much difference it makes when they have a crew to the feel of their videos, isn't it?
Yeah, it just feels more stilted and weird.
Yeah, I don't think it is. I think they have the same process, but it's just the fact they've got crew just changes the way it feels. Anyway, yeah, I don't know if anything on like YouTube Red counts or not. I suspect there's probably going to be a runtime component to this, because this would be the similar thing between like a film that's made for TV versus a TV show, like a single episode of a show. Because if you watch Sherlock on TV, that's a TV show, but it's an hour and a half long, each episode of that, and they're all quite self-contained.
Does the consistency of length matter then to make something a series?
I don't know, because the point I was going to make was that like all the stuff on, at least the way it was shown on YouTube, all the Slow Mo Guys stuff is all really short still. So I don't think you could call that a TV show. I think it probably has to, for me, I think a TV show probably has to eat up about half an hour broadcast, maybe, for it to be a thing. Maybe, I don't know.
I think 10 and 15-minute slots have been a thing.
Yeah, but that's for things like news and stuff. They'll like fit a 5-10 minute thing or even a 15-minute news thing in between other thing.
Yeah, and that's a TV programme. Channel 4 used to do loads of really short format stuff as well.
The line is blurry, we can say that.
See, I'm just taking a quick look on the Bugglebots channel to look at the runtime of episodes.
They're all about 40 minutes, aren't they? That's my recollection.
So it's 37, 38, 45, 50.
Ooh.
Well, almost 51 if we're rounding. 43, 1 hour 1. And then if you call the stuff after that episodes, which I personally would, 12 minutes, 22 minutes, 30 minutes. Although actually the 11 I wouldn't count because that was just the Dung Beetle and the awards. I'd say it needs multiple fights to count as an episode.
So any TV show needs multiple fights to count.
Absolutely. That's pivotal. It's the only reason EastEnders has kept going so long.
I can't believe that's still going. It's mad.
Because I do think that one thing that makes TV is actually the restrictions. The fact they have to fit into a structure. And that's where something like Netflix kind of moves away in terms of you will have some series where they go from 45-minute episodes to a couple that are an hour to an end of season 1 that's like an hour 20 or something. because they can do that. They have that freedom.
So I think what Bugglebots needs to do is they need to get themselves broadcast on like the BBC or Channel 4 or some kind of something that's undeniably a TV channel.
I mean, the BBC don't deserve it.
No. Channel 5, that'd be funny.
Full circle.
Yeah. And then we can say with confidence that you've emailed a TV show. Whether or not Netflix counts, I don't know. Maybe we'll have to have that discussion in more detail if and when Bugglebots is shown on Netflix.
Can we get them on like regional TV?
I suppose a really good example of this kind of thing is Video Game High School, which is on Netflix.
I don't know what that is, but I'm going to sound excited anyway because you suddenly did too.
Did you not watch VGHS? So this was so do you remember on old YouTube, the Freddie W channel?
That's not part of my sphere, I'm afraid.
That's not part oh wow. This is amazing to me. Well, anyway, there was a YouTube channel called Freddie W, and it was just like lots of shorts of just people. This is when like in early days of YouTube, where visual effects were quite an exciting thing to be able to do on YouTube. And so they just did loads of like 5-10 minute shorts every week on that channel around like gaming and all like shooting each other, all that kind of stuff. And they got a lot of popularity that way. And then at some point they pivoted and they grew a lot and they became Rocket Jump, and they produced a long form show with episodes and seasons called Video Game High School, which is, at the time I watched it, I thought it was quite good. I don't know how good it is. Like I don't know how much I liked it just because it was these YouTube guys that I really liked making it versus how good it actually is. But I do think it's probably quite a good show. But it is on Netflix now. Like it was originally made for YouTube and put on YouTube, but they have sold the broadcasting rights to, at the very least, Netflix. And I think it might even be on some other thing in the US as well. So that's probably quite a close analogy, I guess, to what I'm suggesting from Bugglebots. And I don't know if VGHS would count as a TV show. I think maybe it does. I don't know.
If it helps, I think I now remember the original channel.
Well,
I've also ended up in my head on a tangent about YouTubers on TV, which is totally not what we're talking about. But I'm there now. It's like that weird series that had Tom Scott and Colin Furze.
Were they YouTubers then, or were they people who had TV shows that have become YouTubers?
I think they were YouTube first. I think. I don't see how else they would have made their way onto it. Anyway, what are we doing here?
We have gone very, very far off topic.
Should we bring it back round with the old Colin Furze should do Robot Wars?
Yeah, there we go. Back on topic.
So now to the Colin Furze of BattleBots, Al Kindle. Let's run with that. Why not?
Is that right?
I mean, he likes fire. That's. I mean, really, Matt Maxon would be the one, because Colin Furze was a plumber, wasn't he?
He was, yeah. I don't know who the other person you're talking about is.
Sewer Snake and Stinger.
Okay.
Team Plum Crazy, because plumbing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Up next, we've got Sawblaze Blacksmith. And I think this is one of the fights I've seen the most reaction to out of all the fights of the last few episodes. And that reaction has been really varied between people going, that was an amazing fight, and that was a bad judge's decision. And my feelings on it have really, really flip-flopped. And I think I'm now finally arrived at a stable point of what I think about it.
Is that so? Because I don't feel like I have any particularly strong feelings about it. I think it was quite a good fight, and I don't have any strong feelings about the judge's decision, I'm afraid. So, like, what do you think happened? Or how do you feel about it?
I feel like this is the kind of fight I'm supposed to like, and I find it a bit underwhelming. I think there was this big kind of hype train that came with it of, oh, that was a fight that had everything. Unless I'm massively misremembering that, which I could be. But I feel like actually quite a lot of this fight is Sawblaze not quite working right, in terms of they're really struggling to get under Blacksmith because they're wheeling up the whole time. And when they do get under, they're really effective, but those moments are quite rare. And they're struggling a little bit with the driving because of the gyro from the disc. And Blacksmith is there doing Blacksmith things, being able to take hits, staying faced up quite well, getting in underneath, delivering blows that aren't particularly damaging but are all racking up points. And they manage to take the weapon out as well, albeit in a slightly unconventional way. There are lots of good things in the fight, but overall it just feels a bit, go on, do something.
Yeah, I think this is why, like, Blacksmith for me has become less entertaining over time. I think because it's just a hammer. No, like, it's not. I think there just needs to be a bit more. There needs to be more power. There needs to be something different, I think, about Blacksmith for it to appeal to me. Anyway, I think there needs to be more power in the weapon, or more personality in the robot for it to sort of regain something for me. Like the weapon just isn't powerful enough to do any damage to anyone, really. Like it seems, and the flamethrower is cool, but it doesn't do any damage. It doesn't really add anything to the offensive capabilities of the robot. And I don't know. It just feels like it needs something. It just needs a little something else, I think. But
I can see how the novelty of the robot could wear off for someone. That I completely understand. The flaming hammer is something that's always been really good for photos. I can see why you'd look at that and go, I've kind of seen that now. But I still think that Blacksmith is a robot where any fight it goes into ends up being, at the very least, a decent fight. It's a robot that you could give any opponent and it will be quite good.
Well, this is how do you define good? So I think that any fight against Blacksmith will probably last quite a while. Blacksmith is a robust robot, and it will probably last quite a long time. And I think that they will, their opponent will have to work for the win. But I think that in most of those fights, I think Blacksmith will probably lose. If it goes to the judges, it will be close, and Blacksmith seems to frequently lose judges' decisions, which is possibly a bit unfair, but it is what it is. So it's sort of like, it's good if you define good as being a long fight, but it's not good because I don't think there's any tension in the fight. It's like Blacksmith will make it last a while and it will probably lose. It is my feeling about most fights that it does. And is that a good fight? I don't know. I don't think so.
I think with that, it all depends on where you feel the drama of a fight comes from. I'm not necessarily always interested in who's going to win the fight. I'm interested in the action within it. And I think that Blacksmith does always deliver action. Because you're not going to get a sort of one and done big hit robot dead. And you also know that for the most part, because it's a very active robot, you know that it's going to score some hits on the other opponent.
I think it does do a lot of action, but it's a lot of like fairly inconsequential action because the weapon has no power in it. It's just tapping the opponent, It's just sort of, I guess maybe this is just a fundamental thing where there's sort of like there's the visual spectacle of the axe firing, and that's kind of entertaining. But then I think, and I do enjoy that, but I think there's also a part of it for me wants those actions to have consequence. I want there to be a reason for doing it more than just we've got a big flappy thing. And I know this is a little bit hypocritical given the design constraints of Hello there, but like, I would like for that weapon to be more powerful than it is. And it's a bit like, well, what's the point in this if I know that you're probably not going to win this fight, and even if you do, you're not going to have won by doing a lot of damage to your opponent. I don't think. Like, it's just, I don't know. It just feels a bit like, what's the point? A little bit, which is quite harsh. I think. I don't think I mean it to be quite that harsh, but
I think it's very harsh. Yeah, I'll be honest.
I don't mean it to be quite that harsh. This is one of those things that whenever you're talking about it, you're always your opinion will always seem more extreme than it is. Like, I don't dislike Blacksmith. I just think it's a bit boring at this point.
These are quite similar criticisms to what we often get about Duck in terms of, how's it really going to kill anything? It just waits for the other robot to kill itself. There's definitely value in durability and staying power. And because it has the weapon it has, I think it does have the ability to win those judges' decisions. And I think you could quite easily take a view that it was the fair winner of this fight.
I think the advantage that Duck has, and I know we touched on this a little bit with Gruff as well, of being like another robust robot with something that's a bit different to just a little lifter thing, which you could argue that Blacksmith is as well. But the advantage that Duck has is that it fights big spinners, which isn't always true of Blacksmith. And like sometimes it does, I think, but like not all that often, especially in, and I know you're going to say like Saw Blaze is a spinner, but like it didn't do a lot. I don't know. It's just, I don't know what it is about Blacksmith that just makes me go a bit meh at this point. But
it's funny how what you've said there is often a criticism of Duck. This idea that a Duck fight can only be entertaining if the other robot is a big spinner. And when you look at the really good fights Duck has had, they've been against big spinners. You look at Tombstone, you look at Cobalt as the sort of fights it's had that have been particularly spectacular. And they're spectacular because it's taking a beating and carrying on when you wouldn't expect it to. That is where Blacksmith kind of started its career in terms of the Minotaur fight. But actually, you look at any robot in the field, Blacksmith could have a vaguely entertaining fight against it. Whereas Duck, last season, for example, came up against Bronco, and everyone knew going into that Duck could basically do nothing to actively win that fight. They had no offensive potential against Bronco, because, Bronco isn't the kind of robot that you're going to just turn over just enough for it to get stuck, because it's going to jump away from that. And Bronco wasn't going to beat itself by dishing out big hits that it couldn't sustain. So Duck was at more of a design disadvantage in that fight than Blacksmith will ever be.
Yeah, and I think those are all valid, like the idea that a fight with Duck can only be entertaining if there's a spinner involved. I think that's a valid criticism of Duck as well, and I think it's a valid criticism here as well. I just feel that, and I agree that the fight between Duck and Bronco wasn't a highlight, let's say. And I think that's probably how I'm feeling here, where I think the Blacksmith just gets fewer of the big spectacular spinners. Like, it fought Minotaur, and that was quite spectacular. And I feel like it's lost its hammerhead to Tombstone or something, or am I making that up? I can't remember now.
It lost that in the first Minotaur fight. Also lost it in its first, or its only, I think, Bronco fight.
Okay. But, like, it's just... Maybe part of it is that the axe promises something that it can't deliver. Maybe that's part of it for me, that, like, I've seen axes like Beta or like Shatter that are really good, and then there's this one that just isn't as powerful as them.
But it's not trying to be.
I know it's not trying to be, but like it is. It's like if you had a wimpy spinner that's not trying to be particularly powerful, it's just there for some other reason. And it's like, well, it's still the weapon type is still promising something that it's not delivering, and there's something about that with Blacksmith maybe. And I think if Duck had a long run of fights where it wasn't fighting Tombstones and Bite Forces and stuff, like I think if Duck had a long run of those fights, I think I'd feel the same way. I think it'd be like, well, Duck has just lost. Just Duck isn't quite as exciting as maybe I thought maybe I used to think it was.
So what do you make of robots like Whiplash then, or Tantrum, where they've got a spinner, but it's much less powerful than it could have been? They've kind of put it as part of this hybrid weapon, and therefore taken some weight, taken some power out of it. Yeah,
so Tantrums is weird. Whiplash I quite like though, because although it's not as powerful as Spinner, it is used in a unique, well, not quite a unique way, but it's used in an interesting way where they can attack from above with it, and they can use that armor to flip us still. And the other advantage that I think Whiplash has is that it's phenomenally well driven. And I'm not saying that Blacksmith is badly driven, it's just not phenomenally well driven, you know? And so Blacksmith is a fine robot. There's nothing wrong with Blacksmith, but it is average in a lot of ways. It's above average in its durability and stuff, but I think it is average in a lot of ways. And it's just like, Ken, I don't dislike Blacksmith. It's just a bit boring to me at this point. I've seen it a lot, and it's sort of like it's always been the same whenever I've seen it. And it's like, I'd like something new with it maybe, or it to fight different opponents for a change. I don't know.
Anyway, opinions on Blacksmith aside, the other controversial thing you said was you don't think the judge's decision is controversial.
This is definitely one of those things where, like, because my assumption is that basically if a robot does damage and the other one doesn't, then the one that did damage is won. I think when I said that, I sort of hadn't quite remembered that Blacksmith, I hadn't quite remembered that Sawblaze's weapon stopped, so I don't know if this is unfair, but like Sawblaze did a lot of damage to the top armor on Blacksmith, which is why it's sort of like, well, obviously they're going to win.
This is one of those things that was interesting for me reading through the judge's guide, because it kind of emphasises the point that damage counts for more if it affects the way a robot works. So yes, Sawblaze has done good damage to the armour of Blacksmith, but Blacksmith is running just fine. It's kind of superficial. Whereas Blacksmith, admittedly, by just kind of jamming a fork in a sensitive area of Sawblaze, has significantly reduced the effectiveness of their weapon. Not broken it completely, because it's still kind of used a bit like a hammer, but it's not doing nearly as much damage as it once was. So I would argue that makes the damage 2-1 to Blacksmith.
Isn't one of the rules specifically that the damage needs to be done with an active weapon?
Ooh, that's a good question. I thought it was just through intentional action, but that is a very good shout. And something that's going to make me reopen Chrome, which is dangerous for my laptop.
Oh, no.
If you could have a quick look at the rules, that would be helpful, because that's a question that can't go unanswered.
I don't know where I can find the rules.
BattleBots tournament rules. There's this new website called DuckDuckGo that I think you're going to love. Notice how I was going Google and then sidestepped.
And you remembered who you were talking to.
I, however, am going to use a normal person. Actually, no, I'm not, because it's already in my suggestions when I type the word bat. So, through deliberate action, a robot either directly or indirectly using the arena hazards reduces the functionality, effectiveness, or defensibility of an opponent. Damage is not considered relevant if a robot inadvertently harms itself. And then there's weird stuff about how if like part of you explodes and damages something, it doesn't count. So the only time it has to be a weapon is for aggression.
So I guess the tricky one there is intentionality.
Because they've done the damage by losing the ground clearance battle, which you assume they weren't doing on purpose. But you could argue that by having the front facing them at all times, that is at least a half step towards it being intentional.
Yeah, and maybe this is the bit of the ruling that has caused it to be, because it was a split decision, wasn't it? So maybe this is the bit that the judges got a bit, that have their own differences of opinions on as well.
Even then, I don't think it would be unfair to assume that some of the hits Blacksmith landed did something. So I can see how a judge or a couple of judges might go, well, we can't necessarily see any significant damage, but there have been enough hits to areas that we assume there is something there.
I don't know about that.
What am I saying? I really hope that doesn't happen. That would be ridiculous. It's been a long recording session, Sam.
You can't be assuming damage.
Did you just assume my damage?
Oh dear. Who even are you?
I'm a stressed person, Sam. Don't test me.
I just gotta chill, man. You know, take it easy. Don't worry about it. Everything's fine.
If nothing else, I do think that they give the benefit of the doubt when it comes to intentionality of damage. I think if you're not sure if it was intentional, I certainly hope they err on the side of it was. And I think that one is vaguely 50-50.
Yeah, I mean, I think this fight could have gone either way. And I do think that, like, Blacksmith, I think, loses more judges' decisions than I would expect from it. You know, there's sort of like a feeling of, I don't know, I feel like it loses more judges' decisions than is statistically reasonable, if that makes sense, which I think is a bit of a shame. I don't know why that would be, but yeah. I think this fight could have gone either way, and I'd have been fine with it. I think it was a very close fight.
That's fair. Again, I'd have been happy with it going either way as well. I've just been happier if it went for Blacksmith. Excellent. One more fight?
Yeah, we have Rotator versus Tombstone.
It was quite an interesting one for me because I think it was the last time we recorded. I was asking what you do to challenge Tombstone. And it turns out the answer is put it up against a really pointy wedge.
Yeah, it was really cool to see Rotator in its the closest to the Rotator that we all know and love that has been in a long time. So that was really cool. And yeah, the way that wedge is shaped seemed to give Tombstone a surprisingly hard time.
I wonder if that's an intentional piece of wedge design that kind of maximises the amount of good angle you have to throw a big horizontal up in the air. Or I wonder if it's just a question of that's the shape their robot was, so they made the wedge that shape and it just happened to be really good.
I mean, I think you can probably predict what my suspicion there is, but I think you won't like it.
Everything anyone ever did was on purpose, Sam. You know that.
I suspect that it was happy accident as much as it was intentional. There would have been some element of intentionality to the way that's shaped, but
either way, it works.
Yeah. No, it's very cool, and yeah, I think taking out Tombstone's weapon is no mean feat.
Although at the expense of their own weapon as well. Definitely one of the more spectacular pieces of damage. Although they're very good at getting their bars and discs damaged. Yeah,
it was a shame that it sort of shattered, and then because they never really got any good hits with their weapon, did they? It sort of got shattered. Well, they didn't get very many good hits anyway, and it because I think their weapon got shattered before Tombstone's weapon was broken, so they didn't really get a chance to sort of capitalise on the fact that Tombstone had no weapon anymore.
I don't think using their weapon was really part of their strategy anyway, was it?
No.
It was very much be a wedge first and keep the weapon spun up to capitalise when you can.
Yeah.
It was very interesting sort of listening along to Ray's running commentary because he knew exactly when he'd screwed up and killed the weapon.
Yeah, immediately. Because he hit the wall, didn't he? Or he got cornered in by the wall or something, and that I think that's what finished the weapon off.
Yeah, I think it was one of the sort of mechanics boxes of the screws that he turned into and got a really meaty hit that just stopped the bar dead.
Yeah.
Or close to stopped it dead.
Yeah. And I guess it was the motor that died rather than something snapping necessarily, given the fire that we had afterwards.
Yeah, that's one of the better fires we've had this season.
Proper flames coming out of that. That was great.
I suppose that's one of the advantages of Tombstone being quite a sort of large and airy robot. You can have a big fire going on in the back that doesn't get to all the stuff in the front too quickly. So we get to enjoy it driving around on fire for a good minute or more.
Yeah, that was great. And this fight went to the judges as well, didn't it?
No, Tombstone eventually stopped.
Oh, it did stop. I can't remember the end of the fight. How terrible.
Well, I mean, when so much happens before, it's easy to forget the underwhelming bit where two weaponless robots tried to push each other around until one of them succumbed to its injuries.
Yeah, I think that is a very good description of what happened, yeah.
But even then, Rotator still had a significant advantage, purely in terms of having a shaped wedge that could get under Tombstone a bit and just give them that little bit of control as they were pushing.
Yeah.
Even though I always forget that Tombstone does still have a half-decent drive. I can't remember what fight it was a couple of seasons ago now where the weapon died and they were able to push someone around a bit. It's not completely useless without the weapon, but it's 5 or 10% of its actual potential.
Yeah, it's got enough of a drive to be functional, but yeah, it definitely doesn't do well. It needs the weapon. Shockingly, a robot built around the weapon needs the weapon to be any good.
Who needs weapons? I mean, Rotator didn't.
No, clearly not. I think it's funny that Rotator broke Tombstone in a way that Duck didn't. You know, I just think that's kind of interesting.
Again, I do think the very specific angles of that wedge are really key to the way this fight went down. And it's something that, with a robot like Duck, would be quite hard to emulate in a meaningful way.
Yeah, Duck's probably just a bit too small, really, isn't it?
It's kind of locked into having that slightly more simple shape, which still works, but in the fight they had with Tombstone, gave them the opportunity to either hit directly on the front without being deflected, or to almost get around the back of it and snap the ends off like it did. But what Rotator has is almost a sort of classic plough shape if you think of something like a snow plough you might see on the front of a cartoon train or something.
Yeah, or even a real train.
It is that very stereotypical shape that is optimised for making things go upwards and out.
Yeah.
And I think the only reason we don't see it more is that it does have some slight disadvantages in terms of A, it locks you into a really weird shape, and B, it isn't the sort of thing that you could use to effectively feed a weapon very easily.
No, I suppose you couldn't really, could you? It'd be hard to do something different with that. I guess you could build an axe with that shape.
I mean, Dominator 2 kind of had a vaguely similar shape, but even that had it twice, so there was still kind of a plane that things could ride up.
I mean, Shunt almost literally has a plough on one side of it.
Yes, but it's the side that the axe doesn't point towards.
I know, but like it could be the side that the axe points towards.
The side the axe points towards is a scoop, because it gives more control.
The side the axe points towards could be the plough side, though. But like, I don't know, like if you're using... You could have that kind of idea, like obviously Shunt is a bit too big and stuff, but like you could build a slightly smaller version of that and it would work well. Like even if you had the axe going towards the scoop and stuff, you could just reverse into Tombstone a bunch. Like robots often have some sort of specialist bit of armor on the back of them for dealing with certain robots. This could be an example of that would work.
It would. It just seems like a poor way. It seems like a poor design to actually set up a weapon hit. And it sounds like you're trying to say that it's a good idea rather than just a possible idea.
I'm just saying you could do it.
It's like, we know how to make bad ideas. We know that is doable. It's making good ideas that's the hard part.
Indeed.
How did you feel about the premise of this fight?
Oh, was this like the most damaging thing?
Yeah, it felt very Robot Wars Extreme to me.
Yeah, it felt like a bit of a stretch.
I'm glad they did it because we got a really good fight out of it. But I'd much rather they just said, here's a robot that's upset a dangerous horizontal spinner before. Here's a horizontal spinner that it might upset. Now fight.
Well, like, it's not as if every fight needs some kind of justification for it. It could, they didn't have to make any story about this. They could have just been like, and our main event, like most of their main events, like our main event is so and so versus so and so, and there's no like, and we're doing it because of this reason. It's just like, well, there's an implicit we're doing it because we think it would be a good fight, and I think that's fair to say of Tombstone versus Rotator as well. It's like they don't need to justify it in any way. It's like, this is the fight we've decided to do for the main event, and here we go.
I think they often attach something to it. So with Son of Waiachi versus Whiplash, they kind of went with they're both families kind of thing.
Yeah.
And with the first main event of the last season with Tombstone Minotaur, it was, here's a fight that everyone's wanted to see for ages.
Yeah, they do it often, but I don't feel like they do it every time. But like, I don't know, this one felt particularly forced.
It was just it's no more forced than any other. I just think it's forced in a different and therefore more noticeable way.
Yeah, maybe.
Normally they find a kind of competitive justification for it. So, for example, all these examples seem to end up involving Tombstone, but Tombstone versus Duck was a main event because Duck was a robot that you kind of looked at as one that could beat Tombstone. And I'm now going to find out that wasn't a main event, aren't I? I think that might actually have been undercard after all of that. So I think it was at the start of an episode.
I think the problem they have with this one in particular is that they set it up as something of a grudge match, but it was a grudge match that I think most people didn't really understand to begin with. Because I think it was sort of like advertised, because you know they do like a teaser for the next episode at the end of an episode. And I think they sort of teased it as something of a grudge match, but without fully explaining why. And it was sort of like, well, what is the grudge between those two? Like, what's going on here? And it's sort of like, it took a bit more explanation for it to sort of make sense. And even after the explanation, it's like, well, what does it matter?
Either way, I'm glad it happened.
Yeah, it was a great fight.
And also, I'm sure that now they don't have the Desperado tournament to use as the jeopardy for anyone that loses a fight. The fact that Tombstone is not unbeaten is something we're going to hear a large amount about.
Yeah. So at the beginning of this episode, I probably hinted that we were going to cover episodes 6, 7, and 8, but we've had a nightmare recording this and we've run out of time, basically. So we're not going to be able to talk in depth about the Desperado right now, and we will try and get to it. But as we expressed at the beginning, we're both very busy and our schedules don't often line up, so it's a challenge to find time to record all this stuff.
A quick word of advice for anyone that records a podcast: don't do it in the middle of a school. It doesn't work.
It's been super fun, but we have both watched the Desperado. It's a thing that's happened, and I don't know about you, but I quite enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was a really interestingly shaped episode in terms of you had all of those knockouts, and then suddenly that absolutely fantastic final that went to the judges.
Yeah.
Admittedly, I think it was quite a one-sided fight, but... and it was also the fight we expected to get as a final. But yeah, it delivered through and through. I think last year's Desperado was a little bit hit and miss, whereas with the field we've got this year, you were always going to get 8 strong robots in it. And Black Dragon and Minotaur were always likely to be the strongest, but you felt they could be challenged along the way. Yeah,
and it's funny, like of all the robots I would have predicted to have in the Desperado at all, I think having Minotaur in there was a bit of a shock. But once you sort of saw the lineup for the robots that were in it, you saw, you know, Minotaur and I guess to an extent Black Dragon. It's like I always wanted that to be the final, but like you're like, well, Minotaur is probably going to do quite well, assuming they get their robot working again. But it was I don't know, it was a great fight. It was really great to see that sort of to see Minotaur come back to form throughout this little mini tournament, and it was a cool fight to finish on.
And it sets up an interesting sort of potential circumstance for the rest of the season where they're kind of back in contention to be selected. Part of you almost wants to discount their first couple of fights as this kind of aberration and then just take their current form. Black Dragon had kind of shown the potential it had already, and this was just a way for them to confirm their entry in a slightly easier way. I think something they said afterwards was that it makes a nicer schedule for them just as a team in the pits to have that intensive period of fights and then time to prepare.
Yeah, like they're done, they're safe, they can start working on their robot where everyone else has still got all their other stuff to deal with.
Yep, yeah, I imagine they'll be using that time to try and manufacture some spares that they wouldn't have otherwise done and things like that. So it puts them in a really good position to go into that final 16 as strong as possible. Whereas for Minotaur, it was a question of, we need to save ourselves.
Yeah.
And I like I say, I still think they've kind of potentially done that.
Now that they've sort of shown that they can work, I suspect they will be in there just because they're Minotaur. But like, yeah, it is sort of like still hanging on by their fingertips, really.
And that's going to be an interesting thing to watch through the rest of the season. Whatever their next fight is absolutely pivotal.
Yeah.
And I think we have seen what it is, I just can't remember. They're one of those robots where kind of all of their matchups people seem to think have been confirmed. Although we know where the bar for confirmation lies. Very, very low.
Unless you're Ryan, in which case it's very, very high.
It's almost unreachable. Even Black Dragon versus Minotaur is only just confirmed in my head. Which, by the way, was a hell of a shout for the bingo cards, and I was so happy when that came through.
Yeah, that was great. Not quite the context that we expected it to happen in, but it was still great that it happened.
The other really nice thing to see was Ragnarok kind of working a little bit more.
They need to slow down their retraction, I think.
Are they another robot that in your mind has a better retract than fire?
Yeah. Do you not think so? I don't know. Their weapon is weird to me.
And I'm now really confused by how that happens, because we've got the same problem. It doesn't make sense. To be fair, I think it often seems more powerful because it's coming back and hitting an end stop on the robot.
Yeah, that's probably part of it.
And I think the weight distribution when you're coming back can make you seem like you're jumping... Well, you are jumping more than you usually would because you've not designed it to be planted during that movement.
Yeah, that weapon is interesting, I think. I'm sure they've still got lots of teething issues with that robot, which is a shame.
They did at least seem to... Well, I was going to say they did damage to Warhawk. Technically they did. Nothing consequential, but it did show that hammer is hitting hard enough to be a threat.
Yeah, they've got power in it.
Although the way they lost was bizarre. That weird little bend up in the front armour just bent my mind a little bit.
I don't think I quite remember what you're referring to, I'm afraid.
So their sort of front plate kind of comes down to 3 fingers, which I think are either side of some forks when they choose to run them. And they managed to get hit in such a way that just the middle part bent up, which visually just looked really weird to me, and I couldn't quite get my head around it for a while. Maybe that's just a Ryan thing.
It was a clever trick, and I suspect that's just a Ryan thing.
Most things are. But yeah, the Desperado, even though it wasn't a surprise this time, because that was what I really valued about it the first time round, the fact we didn't know it was coming, it still turned out to be a very good episode. And it's just nice to have that kind of heat format for an episode of BattleBots.
Yeah.
It's very satisfying.
It's a good way of breaking things up.
Do the outro.
You can find the show notes for this episode at spinnerproof.com/episode/54, and there you can find links to all the stuff we've been talking about today. You can also find a link to our Twitter at Spinnerproof, where you can tweet to us your favourite upside down elephant.